gravity. Now, and it also coincided with the year of light. As I say, light started it all, and light alone will complete it. And the tone of, the implication that even these best theories are incomplete is intentional, but that's not the topic of discussion today. Now, if you look at the general theory of relativity, its predictions have been verified over the last century with very impressive precision, going back to less than 0.1% in some cases. Some of these are very well-known tests of general relativity and prediction of black holes, except that the prediction of gravitational waves, which was one of the first in linearized gravity, that remained undetectable for 100 years, in spite of people understanding its importance in relativistic astronomy. And it indicates both conceptual and technological challenges involved in detecting these gravitational waves. If you compare this with the detection of electromagnetic waves after Maxwell's theory, Hertz demonstration and so on, it was pretty quick because electromagnetism is a much stronger force. So from 1960, Weber's pioneering efforts with his bar detectors to 2010, when the advanced detectors were more or less getting commissioned, it took that 50 years. So I want to impress upon you that this was because of the inherent difficulties in detecting such weak waves. Now, if you look at the event which has been discussed here, this was the first data from these two detectors, even without visible to naked eye, this Chirp form, without sophisticated analysis and so on. And if you focus on the signals, this is of course a very short signal, 200 milliseconds. This is essentially a measurement of the separation between two suspended matters, and the mirrors are actually moving in a tidal field of gravity which is oscillating, a periodic tidal field of gravity. And mirrors are moving and you measure this separation. And if you look at this units here, it's a strain. So these mirrors are separated by some length. One is just trying to measure the change in this separation, delta L, and the ratio is what is plotted here, and that is 10 to the minus 21. And these are numbers which are unfamiliar even in a very good precision metrology laboratory. But the actual detector, a Michelson interferometer, as you know, is a gigantic 4-kilometer device with the beam splitter here and the two mirrors on the other ends with a lot of inside optics. So to measure this kind of strains, one is talking about displacement measurements at the level of 10 to the minus 19 meters. Now, a Michelson interferometer, as well known, is a fundamental tool for precision metrology. And that is because the wavelength of light is about a micrometer, and it's extremely easy, even in an undergraduate laboratory, to measure fringe shifts as intensities of the order of 1 part in 1,000, even in a crude Michelson interferometer. So if you measure 1 part in 1,000 of this fringe, you are already measuring close to atomic scale displacement. It's already very impressive for a crude detector, except that here one is measuring 13 orders smaller than this optical wavelength. Okay, and that is the first challenge, technological challenge one has to look at. Question is, why was this precision and sensitivity required? And that has to do with the physics of gravitational waves. In Einstein's formula, radiated energy, which Bala showed, is of this form, which has a quadrupole moment and so on. And the tidal separation between two masses, which also is calculated, again which Bala showed here, is the simple formula. So the factors which affect this is g by c to the 4 coefficient, which is a coupling of gravity coming there and the relativistic effects. And it's a tidal field, so it's proportional to the length. Now if you put in, even when I wave my hand, gravitational waves are emitted, but you can use this formula to estimate how much is the strain, which you can measure at a distance. It is utterly small. And even for a solar mass black hole in Milky Way, if you put in extreme numbers here, like V being close to C and so on, it's already 10 to the minus 90. So this simple formula already tells you this is the maximum you can expect, even for a galactic black hole binary. So if you are looking at extragalactic sources, one need to design a detector with strain sensitivity below 10 to the minus 22. And with a kilometer size detector, this becomes the measurement of 10 to the minus 19 meters or smaller. So when these waves reach the detector, this is what you expect for a set of free suspended masses. This is a quadrupolar field and masses will move like this. Therefore, a Michelson interferometer is sort of a natural detector for gravitational waves, because this is exactly what this detector is sensitive to do. The differential motion of two mirrors, like one mirror going out, the other mirror coming in out of phase. That's what it's most sensitive to. So that is why people think this is the ultimate detector for gravitational wave astronomy. Now, if you look back at the pioneer, when he constructed these bar detectors, in some sense, it had sensitivity reaching of the order of 10 to the minus 15 to 10 to the minus 16 already. And the first interferometric detectors were conceived by somebody worked with Weber, Robert Forward, and already in 1978, he operated a 10-meter interferometric detector alone in Hughes laboratory with vacuum and so on, and had a sensitivities matching this, and operated in coincidence with all the bar detectors in the world, looking for gravitational waves. This also looks like a single author paper here, but this is a loaded boat surfing the happy waves now, 1,000 people here. Okay, that's the difference between 78 and 2016. Okay, now if you look at the noise in these interferometers, essentially it comes from fundamental physics. The basic noise in these interferometers comes from fundamental physics. How well you can split a fringe, how well you can determine the motion of a fringe in an interferometer, how well you can determine the position of a star in the sky in a CCD camera. All that is determined by fundamental optics in the following sense. If you look at a fringe, this is the minimum, that's the maximum. So for a wavelength change of lambda by 2, you go from zero intensity to maximum intensity, which is n number of photons per second, let's say, which is given by just power of the laser divided by energy of the photon. Now, if you have a coherent wave, like in a laser, it is a sum of all the number states in quantum optics. Therefore, the noise is Poissonian and square root of n. So the minimum delta n you can measure in optics, given by fundamental quantum optics, is square root of n. So which means that determines the minimum delta x you can measure here. When you put about 10 watt of optical power, which is already quite difficult for a very pure laser beam, you see that the best you can do in a Michelson interferometer is only 10 to the minus 16 meter, even for 10 watt optical power. And this is a lesson, because even the best 4 kilometer Michelson interferometer cannot reach the sensitivity required to measure gravitational waves. You need 10 to the minus 19. 10 watt of optical power will give you 10 to the minus 16. So you cannot just use a Michelson interferometer. You need something better. You can increase the laser power, but that's only a square root of an advantage, which doesn't help you. But there's a very simple technique which you can do. You fold the optical path as many times as you want without losing laser light. So the best way to do that is to make a Fabry-Perot cavity, where you can, if you have good mirrors, you can send it back and forth several hundred times. And that is one of the major techniques which enhances this displacement linearly now, because it's just multiplied by the number of foldings. Okay, so a modern gravitational wave interferometer has this laser. There is something to clean the laser beam spatial modes. We'll come back to this. Here there is a beam splitter, Michelson there, and the Fabry-Perot cavity inside here you can see. Now you operate near a dark fringe. Therefore, most of the light goes back into the laser. You put an extra mirror and a cavity to send back that laser again multiple times, power recycling. You get a square root of advantage there. So you include every possible innovation which you could think of from 1970s to now and put it into this interferometer, and that's how one reaches below 10 to the minus 19 meters. And there are these three interferometers, two in the US and one in Virgo, the PISA, which is coming up on next year. Now, there is another noise source, which is the radiation pressure noise. There are two mirrors and light stored in between. Square root of n is the number noise in the photons, which means the momentum transfer to these mirrors are also square root of n. And that will pushing the mirrors, and that's a random noise. So you have to consider that. But fortunately, this is a force, and the response of this pendulum goes as 1 by f square. So at high frequency, it's not so important. But at low frequency, this is a limit. This is an important limit. Then the next question is, how can you hope to measure 10 to the minus 19 meters when the ground vibrations are like 1 micrometer? Fortunately, the engineering solution to this is known for a long time. All you need is just set of pendulums and springs. This is a resonant system. Since the resonant system, below the resonant frequency, response is 1, but higher frequencies, it's 1 by f square. So if you add enough springs and pendulums, you can cut down, you can cascade 1 by f square stages, and they all multiply to give you enough isolation at high frequency. So if you have suspensions at, let's say, sub-hertz, 1 hertz or so, at 30 to 40 hertz, you're already down by a factor of 1,000. 4 stages will give you 10 to a factor of 10 to the 12. It is an engineering, it's a difficult problem engineering-wise because of coupled pendulums, but physics-wise it is easy to handle. So all these mirrors are isolated at the level of 10 to the minus 20 meters at the mirror level. Therefore, these experiments can be done. And in actual LIGO, you can see already the suspensions are multi-stage. And the last suspension stage, in fact, has to be on glass fibers, fused silica fibers, to reduce even thermal noise and things like that. So engineering implementation of this is very complicated. You can see some pictures here. I don't want to go into too many details. And specifically in advanced LIGO, the vibration isolation also has a lot of feedback. You have a lot of springs and pendulums, but their motion is measured and there are actuators acting back on them so that they are kept near zero. They are not just free suspensions. Okay. This is another innovation which was required to make things stiffer. On the other hand, in the Virgo detector, the entire vibration isolation system is completely passive. Just a set of springs like this bow and simple pendulums. 8 stages, handles a vibration at the top level of 10 to the minus 11 meters that is attenuated to 10 to the minus 20 meters at the bottom. Completely passive. Okay. So these are the schemes. Now in the advanced LIGO design, a laser is supposed to be there with about 200 watts, ultra pure, with intensity noise of 1 part in 10 to the 9, which you have to do in the laboratory by feedback techniques. And the mirrors are supposed to store about 1 megawatt of laser power. So you can see that even a 1 ppm of absorption on these mirrors can heat up these mirrors, distort them and so on. Thermal noise is, that kind of thermal noise is also an issue. Radiation pressure noise is an issue. So we have not reached the sensitivity yet. LIGO has been operating at a sensitivity which is about 3 times smaller than what is planned in this picture. And of course, everything has to be in ultra-high vacuum over this 8 kilometers of arm length and so on. These were big challenges, but all of they are, you can think of them as something in between engineering challenges and physics challenges. You know what you put in what you know from physics and implement it engineering-wise. The high-power laser, I already mentioned the intensity noise and laser. These are achievable today in standard technology. So, as I said, short noise is frequency independent. The radiation pressure noise is 1 by f square. As a function of frequency, this is a strain noise. The seismic noise is serious, but it can be pushed down by enough low frequency suspensions. It can be made steeper by enough stages. And this is a curve you see as a sensitivity curve in typical LIGO. Of course, there are other noise sources from thermal noise and so on, KT kind of thing on the mirror. You have to use a very heavy mirror to reduce the thermal noise. The coating thermal noise is a problem. But typically, this is the kind of curve you see, which was shown here several times. So the detection, the detectors, while the detections happened, the design was with 20 watt of laser power, but essentially the same kind of a detector. Okay. Now, the advanced detector, there is a big challenge to go from what is it here today at the level of 10 to the minus 23 down. Okay, factor of 10 improvement from the earlier detector is what is expected. We are now somewhere in between here. And every bit counts because the wave, like electromagnetic wave, attenuates as just 1 by r. So if you improve the sensitivity of the detector by a factor of 2, the volume which you cover is 2 cube, which means 8 times more sources. So even the smallest innovation which can help to improve the sensitivity a little bit can help a lot in improving the astronomical reach of such detectors. And you can see comparison with earlier and future runs here. I've shown a picture here. This is where the detector is right now at these red curves here. But there are stages of improvement which is planned where you go down very close to 10 to the minus 24 at 200 hertz in these detectors. And the detection so far happened here with a signal to ratio of about 23. As the sensitivity improves, you can see the signal to noise ratio can go all the way of several hundred with the same kind of technology which is applied, available today. Except that, as I said, because of the stored power and so on, there are unsolved problems in advanced LIGO where the mirrors are distorting and so on. These problems have to be solved. Okay? There are issues to be handled. Now, a thermal noise, a slightly dissipative mirror coating is a big issue. One may not have thought of such a thing, but it's just the fact that anything which is dissipative also has this fluctuation. So there are a lot of innovative attempts to look at new crystalline coatings and amorphous coating, new coating strategies, new materials coating, and moving to silicon, a different wavelength and so on, so that one can keep on improving this sensitivity curve to the extent that you can do regular astronomy with gravitational waves just like you do optical astronomy, seeing several sources a day. Now, I just want to show one picture here of coating thermal noise data, because I know there are people here who work on material science a lot. You can see that this is not measured in advanced LIGO, a smaller interferometer. You can already see the strain noise if you look at, because the coating on the mirrors are fluctuating relative to the center of mass of the mirrors. The thermal noise at room temperature, it's already at the level of 10 to the minus 18, 10 to the minus 19 meters. So it's a real limit. Okay. Now, if you look at future as a challenge, in 2023, we envisage that there will be a network of these detectors doing gravitational wave astronomy. Kagra is progressing extremely well. Maybe it will come on in 2019 or so. And it uses cooled mirrors, cryo-cooled mirrors, to avoid the thermal coating problem. It's a serious problem. LIGO India detector is supposed to be operational by 2023, advanced Virgo in 2017 and so on. This is, of course, to do astronomy pointing, triangulation and so on extremely precisely. Now, for the LIGO India detector itself, the technology and strategy is well known and tested, because it is essentially the advanced LIGO detector itself. All the interferometer components are available from advanced LIGO. Full expertise of LIGO is also accessible. However, there are LIGO India specific challenges which we need to handle. Unfamiliarly large and detailed technical infrastructure. It's the first time something like this will come up. A team building, sustained effort on schedule and quality control. Master every innovation that has gone into the advanced LIGO at home. We have to do this here. Okay. For example, one example here is the use of squeeze light in sub-short noise metrology. You use ideas from quantum optics to look at metrology strategies which will help you to go below the short noise and improving on the square root of n limit which come from fundamental physics. Okay. But before I end this talk, I want to talk about a general challenge which is facing gravitational wave researchers who want to build new kind of instruments. That's the low frequency frontier. Already the two detections of these two binary black holes, as several astrophysical estimates have shown that if you go to, it has shown that there are large number of binary black holes in this universe, and probably heavier than what we imagine. Okay? If that is the case, heavier black holes going slower around each other before merger will lead to lower frequency gravitational waves and stronger gravitational waves. Amplitude will be larger, frequency will be smaller. In fact, that was the plan for the space detector called LISA. And if you look at, so this is advanced LIGO sensitivity curve here at 10 to the minus 23 level. But the estimates that if you build a 1,000,000 kilometer space detector at low frequency, 10 to the minus 2 hertz, 100 seconds sensitivity at that 100-second period waves, it needs only 10 to the minus 20 strain sensitivity to regularly see black hole binaries. If you go to lower frequencies, you can even have larger sensitivities and so on. Another way of looking at it is, if you look at the black hole mergers which were seen in advanced LIGO today, they have been going around each other in stable orbits for days and days in some lower frequency earlier. Several, EM by R cube tidal field at low frequency. A bird flying, an aircraft flying, somebody moving, it's all Newtonian noises at kilometers.